Welcome to another episode of the Build Groups podcast. My name's Adam Erlickman, your host, and we have a great guest with us today, guys. Now, I can for sure, with full confidence, say that this is an incredible, great, amazing guest because this is someone who is just joining the Build Groups team. He's come through. He has a great history of helping others and coaching them through it and consulting them. He has an immense amount of church ministry in his background. And I am just pumped for you all to get to know him more the way, hopefully, that I know him, because everything I've gotten to get to know about Nick Edwards, I have loved. He's become a quick friend of mine. He's been a benefit even to my understanding in my business and my ministry and what we're doing here at Build Groups. And I know that he's already been helping churches very swiftly, very quickly, and they have been very thankful as well. Now, as you all know, we talk a lot about small groups in this podcast. We talk a lot about discipleship and those steps and what that looks like. We're going to talk about a little bit just something different that greatly affects small groups and discipleship. We're going to kind of narrow in, we're going to dial in on the area of the executive pastor. Okay, the executive pastor. And Nick has a lot to share with us in this space that I think going to be greatly benefited by, whether you are a pastor or small groups or kids or student. Doesn't matter what your role is. You getting to hear this is going to be a help and an aid to how you approach and you do your ministry. Understanding more about what this role looks like, how it can benefit, some of the challenges and the obstacles that are removed by this person being in this role, and how you can work well in collaboration with them for it. Now, as you know, we don't seek to answer all your questions. We're here to spark, start, and spur on some good thought trails so that you're starting to ask some questions that maybe you weren't prior to listening to this episode. And I know Nick is about to do that for you here. So, Nick, man, welcome to the Build Groups podcast.
Man, Adam, thank you so much. It is an honor to be a part here. Thank you so much for all the accolades that you give me and all the credit that you give me for being part of the team and the influence that I have. I am really honored to be part of the Build Groups team and be working with you and just continuing to invest in pastors and leaders and ministries and churches that really are on the front lines in ministry and in the world.
Amen. Amen. It's been fun already, and we are just getting started. So, Nick, just so the audience knows a little bit more about you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just some background, family, maybe a hobby or two as well would be good.
Yeah. So I have been married for 23 years now. And so me and my wife Leslie have been doing ministry even before we were married. We were doing ministry together. We have 3 daughters. That's why I tell everybody I'm bald and broke. With 3 daughters, that's what happens to you.
We'll get you
And
one of
it's
these. We'll
all,
get you a nice Bill Groups hat, Nick. Don't
yeah,
worry.
something to cover up the bald, shiny head. And so, but it has been a crazy journey really for us. You know, God takes everybody on a different journey and you never really understand what it's going to look like or how you're going to get to where you are today. But for me, I knew at 16 years old that God was calling me into ministry. I knew there was this call upon my heart to be a pastor. I didn't know what it looked like, much like pastors. They don't know what it's going to look like, but they know there's this call, compelling, overwhelming vision of God to continue to follow God in this new path. God's taken me on a crazy journey. I went from majoring in church ministry, being in seminary, and then as soon as I graduated college, I was on church staff, working in youth ministry, then became a college pastor, then became pastor over young adults. And during this process, we have our first kid, and God takes us on this crazy journey that God gives us a vision for something different. We really weren't sure what it's going to look like. And just through a lot of trials and different situations, I ended up being a Dallas police officer for 7 years. Never thought
Wow.
that's the journey I would have been on. Never thought that's where I would be. But I went from growing up in church, doing all the things in church, surrendering to God, being in ministry, to being police officer for 7 years, and then becoming an elder at my church before going on staff again.
Wow. Yeah, quite the journey, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I worked in private sector right before I came into occupational ministry, as we call it, full-time. I think everyone has a vocation, just some have an occupation that's at the church, right? And I think there can be so many benefits to seeing how the non-church staff people live, right? Just your congregational members.
Sure.
And there being a lot of sympathy, empathy, understanding, insight to just what their everyday life is like when we go on to a church staff. So that's really interesting. I'm sure that those 7 years of police work served you. You became a divine policeman after that? Is that what happened when you went back on staff? No.
Yeah, like that. I was a overseer of my church and position for their groups and discipleship pastor opened up and got a call from one of the pastors that, hey, let's go have breakfast, and said, would you be interested in this? And for months, I'd been praying, God, I know this season is coming to an end. I know you have something different. Able to go on staff at the church that we were actually attending and I was overseer at, was there for years, moved from one campus to two campuses. We eventually, by the time I left there, we were at 5 campuses plus online, continuing to grow. And so my role went from groups pastor to groups and campus pastor to overseeing groups over all campuses, overseeing men's ministry over all campuses, overseeing campus pastors, and then really kind of became this executive pastor role, helping with finances across all campuses and really having a bigger influence across the ministry of who we are as a church.
Man, that is quite the journey. Now, just for kicks and giggles for our audience, what's like a hobby that you have? Anything in particular like, oh yeah, this is my thing I enjoy doing, or what do you got?
Yeah, I love hunting, spend a lot of time hunting. It's my time away. And then playing a little bit of golf. I wish I could play more, but kids get all the golf money these days.
Man, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Yeah, I joke around with people. I say, yeah, I'm a co-vocational church planter, which means, some people blow money on golf. I blow it on church planting, right? So we invested in church planting and planting church, right? So I get that, man. And kids, oh yeah, just eat you out of the house. It's unreal growing kids. So let's get into our subject today on executive pastors. There are, I think, so many different iterations and versions or types of executive pastors out there that obviously have different gifting, wiring, ability. But there's also a lot of different types of job descriptions, I feel like, when you look at, well, the XP is more focused on this one, or you just have the XP who is treading water and it's like you just do basically everything
You're just the
except
catch-all of everything.
right, you're the catch-all. You do all the hard work, all the grind and grime without any of the glory. You don't get to preach Sunday morning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you define for us a little bit of the executive pastor role?
Yeah, I think, every church plays this role a little bit different. Maybe it used to be called an associate pastor, maybe it's a discipleship pastor, but this role of executive pastor, I think really is what we see in the heart of when the church is growing. And in Acts 6, they call Stephen and they call these people to feed tables and to be able to handle some of the administrative duties of the ministry so that Peter and John can continue to preach. So, and what they say in that is, I can't feed tables because I'm called to preach. And so there's this ministry, this administration that has to happen within the church that is so necessary. And who's going to do it? A lot of times we call that a role of a deacon or maybe a group's leader that really there as that under shepherd in some ways. But the executive pastor is the person who really acts as the chief operations officer of the church so that the pastor can focus on vision, preaching, and being able to communicate the word of God.
The biblical, some people do wonder, it's like, oh yeah, we understand where a discipleship pastor or where the group's pastor, comes from, or the preaching lead pastor comes from, but the executive pastor, can you help me find that one in the script? So that's very helpful.
So
Thanks
I
for
think
that,
it's
Nick.
important that every church defines those positions. It doesn't matter, whether you're hiring a youth pastor or children's pastor or whatever that is, having a role clarity and really defining what this person does, what the objective is, what's the key outcomes, so that they have a target. And what happens when you don't have a clear target of what your job is, you just start shooting every which way instead of actually moving with purpose. And so I think for the role of the XP, there's this balance of operations and people because they're probably still overseeing staff. Maybe they're the person that oversees all staff and all ministries. And so they're having to figure out HR and policies and finances and facilities. and staffing and ministries.
There's a few things there. There's a few things there. So let's do this before we go right into, because we could quickly go into, hey, what are some of the challenges that are being faced by executive pastors in these roles? When should a church hire an executive pastor? Like, what is the point of, oh, hey, it's time, like we need one?
Yeah, think I've thought about this a lot lately. And when did it lead to me in that position, looking at other churches that I've worked with, looking at different models that are out there? And the XP is probably not for most churches, because what we know is most churches are under 200, 250 people. But when you hit that 900, maybe that 1,000 person mark, there really becomes this need for someone who can take some weight off the pastor. And this all depends upon pastor's gifting, what the passions are there. And a lot of times pastors want to hold on to things, but when they hold on to things, they don't actually get to do what they do best. And so this gives the freedom at that 700 to 1,000, maybe a little bit over there, for the pastor to focus on what he needs to do in order that this person helps create the margins and the focus of executing the vision of the pastor.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe they call him something different, a director of operations or administrative pastor, or, but what are
Associate
some of the,
pastor. Yeah, there's a lot of terms out there.
yeah, associate pastor. What are some of the challenges that executive pastors that they're running into as they are stepping into the role, they're executing, they're going, they're doing? What are some of the biggest challenges that they face?
Well, I think the first thing that the role that the executive pastor has to have is a solid, great, trusting relationship with the senior pastor. They have to be each other's right hand man. They have to walk in lockstep with each other, that the pastor is casting the vision and the executive pastor is executing the vision. They are the ones making it happen. And so the challenge for the executive pastor a lot of times is, what do you actually want me to accomplish? And being able to have some clarity of, okay, pastor, what is the vision for our church for a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Who are we? What do we want to be known for? Where are we going? What things are we going to accomplish along the way? And what does it look like? And so the senior pastor says, that's where we're going. The executive pastor builds the strategy to get there. And so if vision is not clear, it's very hard to build that roadmap.
Yes. Now, from not just a, just a generic type question here, because I've watched you interact with pastors, right? Nick, like I've gotten to see how good you are at helping just remove those obstacles to create that, do the exact thing that you're saying that needs to happen, right? What are some of the things that you do as a consultant with churches, with lead or executive pastors? What are some of the things that you do to make that a reality and just, man, pave that road real, just clear and clean and smooth?
So what I tell people is, I can't do your job better than you can. Called to be the senior pastor. I can't help you. I can't cast that vision for you. That's your role. I can't be the executive pastor of your church. That's this person's role. But what I do is ask hard enough questions that you wouldn't ask yourself. And so being able to ask hard questions and put the pressure on the senior leadership, not to put pressure on them, but to help clarify who they are and where they want to go. And what I find is a lot of senior pastors carry this weight, but because they don't know how to communicate it, or maybe they know how to communicate it, but they think they're also supposed to execute it. And there's this gap in the middle of what does it look like. And so when I ask enough questions, you get better answers. And you ask better questions and harder questions, you actually get more clarity. And so I just help them create the clarity that they want. They just don't know always how to accomplish it. And sometimes it takes an outside person to ask those questions to actually help you get there.
Key questions. And when you're doing this all the time with people, you become the best question asker. It's so, right? You
Yeah.
can pinpoint it out a lot quicker and actually pinpoint it where most don't.
Yeah. So my heart is for the church. And one of the things that I feel like God's just been teaching me in my own time is, do you love my bride? do you love my bride? You know, Adam, what if I said, man, Adam, I love you and we're great friends. And man, I love you, but I don't like your wife. You're probably going to say, well, we can't be friends, right? It's not going to work. You can't say, well, you're my best friend
Yeah.
and you hate my wife. That
We could
doesn't
keep it a
work.
secret for a short bit, maybe, but I think we could
Maybe.
get caught.
Yeah. And so people say they love God, but do you love his bride? And so for me, what it means is how do I invest and help the bride to be strong and courageous and help pastors to live out that vision of being the bride of Christ? And so what that plays out for me is over the last 3, 4 years, I've been able to do some consulting with large corporations, nationwide companies and businesses, and helping ask hard questions to them. And so ultimately, I want to be able to do that for the church instead of the business world. But a lot of times, the business world funds ministry, and you understand that part of it as well. I have this one business owner that I work with, and like he makes more than you and I combined over the next 5 years. He's going to make this year. Okay, so that kind of guy. And what he says is, Nick, it always frustrates me after we meet. And I was going, well, what the heck does that supposed to mean? And he's this big guy and he's kind of rough. And he goes, you never tell me anything I don't know. You just ask the questions I would never ask myself. And I think that's the role of coach and consultant is to ask the questions to help you get what you actually want to get.
Yeah. Yes. And you don't get that by reading another book. It's having to look in the mirror
That's right.
and, see yourself and ask, and what does this take today? What does this take next week, 90 days? And yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And as I said, I mean, you're phenomenal just in the interactions I see you have with pastors on this front. So it's good. So let's move more towards once that road is cleared and it's smooth and it's just, hey, let's go, man. Let's drive. What are the advantages, some of the greatest advantages of having a healthy executive pastor on the staff for both the senior pastor and the overall church culture? Like, how does that affect everything else to have like an executive pastor who's ready to roll and can do this well?
Yeah. So once the vision's cast and then you start creating this roadmap, this strategy. So the way I say it is vision is where we're going. Mission is how we're getting there. Mission is the movement. So the executive pastor gets to execute the movement of the people of God towards the vision that the pastor has cast. And so the pastor gets to spend time with God, working on the message, working on clarifying the vision. And now this executive pastor gets to work with staff to execute that. We're all in alignment. We're all going the same way. So even our verbiage of, well, do we call it small groups with kids and life groups with students and community groups with adults, that all of our verbiage, all of our working is all going the same direction. And they get to bring about the alignment so that it gives the pastor freedom. It also creates freedom and direction for every other ministry to make sure they're in alignment with who we are as a church.
Yeah. I mean, because, right, if someone just 1 degree off, like initially, it's not a big deal, but as you get a few miles down the road, it's like, man, you're miles apart, right?
Sure.
And that's, I mean, we could go to Corinthians and Paul where he talks about having common language and how, I mean, important that is for us as a team, staff,
Yeah.
uh, entire church to share common language around vision and mission, to be moving the same direction and not have, well, multiple mountains that we're trying to take and diverting our efforts, right?
Yeah. And so what the executive pastor does is help align our evangelism, our community outreach. So how we're reaching people with our assimilation. Once we get them in, what are we doing with them? Then to discipleship. And that the evangelism, the assimilation, and the discipleship all have to work in step with one another. And there's a clear process. So the executive pastor gets to focus on those steps. Those may be 3 different people in a large church, maybe all one person. Maybe the executive pastor is doing all those roles, right? But they get to make sure everything is moving together.
Yeah, seamless and
Right.
move. Yeah, right. From outreach to first guests to next steps to joining a group to serving. And then the
Yeah,
cycle starts over. Hey, now you're out there doing outreach and bringing them in.
that's right. Well, and
You
that's
know,
what we wanna do at Build Groups, right? We wanna help them connect their groups, their discipleship, their volunteers, that all of this is just working in this one process, working together.
yeah, I think a great practical example of this, and maybe this resonates with you, Nick, and some of you in the audience. I think you've probably seen something like this or experienced something like this, where you've got a church, they do this massive outreach event, and they might have thousands of people on their campus for that event. And it's over, they come, they go, and they celebrate that we had this many people on our campus last. This was incredible. And there was never an intentional plan decided, determined, or even discussed on the front end. Well, what does it look like for us to engage them beyond this and, actually maybe share the gospel or move them into, hey, why don't you come to church on Sunday? Or why don't you join a small group? Like there was no kind of boots on the ground effort to engage with these people. And it was all about, well, we just spent, 40 grand and we had all these people here. And you're like, okay, well, not that it needs to be about metrics and conversions, but like, did we, but like,
What's the
I
purpose?
would, yeah, then that's what you're talking about, right? I mean, is that a good example you'd say? What
No,
XP
absolutely.
helps?
Yeah, and this is what I love being able to do when I'm sitting down with an executive pastor, is asking this question. Okay, on your calendar over the next 6 months, you have this event, this event, this event, you have a youth program, you have this outreach event that's going on. How do all of those align with the strategy of accomplishing our vision? And if it doesn't, an event doesn't move us towards that vision, we don't do it. Or we
Mhm.
have to reprogram it in order to accomplish that vision. So asking those kind of questions with an executive pastor going, okay, your youth team wants to do this. How does that accomplish the vision? Well, I don't know, that we've just always done that event. Okay, but it's a chunk of your budget. There's no strategy to move us. What are we doing? And so one of the things that you see in Jesus' ministry, at one point it says, and he turned his eyes towards Jerusalem. Everything else was distraction. I'm going that way. You see this in Paul. He knew he had to go to Jerusalem in order that he would go to Rome and
Yeah,
eventually be in prison there, right? We have to be intentional in our movement of where we want to go. And every time that we do something that's kind of this one off, if we don't have a follow up process to it, it creates confusion with our staff and confusion with our people. And every time it dilutes the importance of the vision that we're really trying to accomplish.
100%. Absolutely. I was thinking of just another practical example of what you're saying. Every ministry, they have handoffs, right? From next steps, first
Sure.
yes, to groups, discipleship, to kids, to students to young. I mean, and so all those handoffs, I find when you have an XP who can help in that larger size with all the dynamics going, man, it can really grease the tracks well for a smooth transition, right? Of handing people off here to
Sure.
there and they feel cared for and seen and invested into. I mean, is that your experience?
Yeah. So your children's pastor, your youth pastor, and the person who's doing assimilation and working with volunteers, they all need to have the exact same vocabulary and language of how we're handing people off to the next step. Now, your children's pastor may not think strategic. That's the role of the XP, is to help them create those systems. The
Yeah.
youth pastor, he's ADD and he's all over the place, right? And he's bringing in a bunch of kids, and that's what you want him to do. You want him to bring in a bunch of kids. The youth pastor's job is not to worry about the mess. It's about worried about the mess of kids' lives and getting them in. So, what helping them all to create the systems? Use your strengths. Go do what you do, and now let's create some back end systems to help you actually continue to move forward and accomplish our vision as a church.
Amen. That's it. Now, as we start to build out those systems and we have handoffs and we have movement and we have, right, all those things that the XP is coming in there doing, I think some have had the experience, especially in the ever changing dynamic of church growing from, hey, at 200, we were much more like a family. And then 400, it got a little bit harder. And then at six
Yeah.
to 800, this XP came in and he started implementing all these, standard operating procedures and these policies. And how do you have an XP come in and it help offer structure and still have productive movement and efficiency without it becoming like corporate and feeling impersonal?
Yeah, this is so important. One of the things that I love being able to help churches do, large corporations do, is hiring. And your hiring process is so important to your future. What I tell small business owners is that a bad hire is the most expensive thing you do. I think it's true for churches too.
Oh,
You
it
hire
is.
someone, you
There's
you hire
data out
someone.
there, man. Vanderbloemen's got data. Someone has got data. I've seen it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So a bad hire doesn't just cost you today. Even after you fire them, it doesn't end. They've eroded culture, they've eroded trust, they've eroded volunteers, all these things. So here's what I want to be able to say for the executive pastor. We're not calling you chief operations officer. We're not calling you director of operations. We are calling you executive pastor because you have to have the heart of a pastor. We are not looking for an operations person. We are looking for a pastor who God has wired on this administrative side rather than on the teaching side. Doesn't mean they can't teach, but they're wired differently and that God's given them these unique strengths. So we want to remind them you are a pastor first. And what we see in Ephesians 4 is the pastors, shepherds, teachers, evangelists are to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And a lot of times pastors think that's church members. It can't start with church members if it doesn't start with our staff. So the role of the XP is also to be the trainer, the pastor to the pastors, the pastor to the staff who knows their heart, who cares for
Yes.
these under shepherds, right? They're the shepherds that are leading ministries underneath our senior pastor and going, if you lose the heart of your team, you've lost your team. And so we have to be pastor first before systems, before execution and operations. We have to move forward, but we cannot be understanding and losing the heart of our team. And what we know right now is from senior pastors to youth pastors, they just feel the weight of the world. And the role of the XP can be the person who's really the staff pastor.
Amen. Been there, done that. Feel everything
Yeah,
you're saying right there, man. Been on both sides of it, and positive, negative. Some of the negative I experienced, I took to make sure was positive for the people that I was
sure.
over as an XP. So I mean, over staff. We always conclude the Build Groups episode the same way with the same questions. My favorite question is not with us today, so I get to ask it. So I'm pumped about that. And some might be feeling a disconnect when I ask this in relevance with or in relation to an executive pastor. Because usually we're asking, right, hey, in a small group discipleship experience, like what's one story of life transformation you've seen? And I think because many consider the XP role so structured, or maybe they view it as corporate, or man, it is still so significantly transformative in the effect your ministry has. And I think people need to see the
Yeah.
human and the personal side of that, right? So, is there a story of life transformation that comes to mind where the an XP made a difference? Maybe it was you when you're an XP or someone else, a story of transformation happening in a person's life because of the XP's role in that.
Yeah, I can think of a few. Can I tell one of a senior pastor
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
and really work to help him lean on his executive pastor? So I'm sitting in this pastor's office maybe a year and a half ago, and amazing pastor. I'm not going there for consulting. I'm going there really to learn from this pastor who's in his late 50s, just to ask some questions. This godly, spiritual man who seeks the will of God, amazing leader, great pastor, great preacher. And so I'm just sitting in his desk and we're just sitting there talking. And I just said, Pastor, how are you today? And he goes, man, I'm doing good. But I felt like he wasn't telling me the whole story. And so, you just have this prompting in the spirit and you're going, I'm about to put this out there. I'm not sure how this is going to go. This, I want to honor this guy and I don't want to feel like I'm questioning him at all and want to make sure that I'm being respectful. And spirit just kind of gave me some courage in this. And I leaned in. I said, Pastor, that, that door's closed. It's just me and you. How are you really doing? And this pastor is mid to late 50s, just drops his head and he begins to cry. And now I'm going, uh-oh, what did I step into? What is this about to be? And he just says, Nick, I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed with life and ministry. I'm overwhelmed with all the pressures of the world. I don't have anybody that I'm talking to. And I just feel it. And I knew his executive pastor, and he's an awesome leader, great person, great man. And I said, have you shared any of this with your team? And he just says, who can I share it with? And I think one of the things that me and you have a heart for is not just the ministry, but for the pastor, the group's pastor, the executive pastor, the senior pastor, the youth pastor. We want to be able to care for their heart. And what I realized is this pastor felt all alone and he needed someone to talk to. And sometimes that's what we get to do. We're going in there to kind of consult and talk some strategy and talk about next steps. But sometimes we just get to sit and hear. And I can just tell you, this pastor's in a great place today. He's got some help. He's leaned in on his team. He has an amazing team. He was just afraid to put too much on them. And so being able to lean in on them, put more on his executive pastor who can carry that weight while he gets healthy through this process. And so what I would tell groups pastor, youth pastor, executive pastor, senior pastor, man, if you're struggling right now and you just want to schedule a call with us for that purpose, we don't have to talk about strategy. We can talk about that the next time. We want to be in this with you to be able to help you be healthy so that your church can be healthy in order that you can be a church that produces disciples over and over again. And so we're in this with you.
Amen. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thanks for sharing that, Nick. That's the role and the significance that an executive pastor can make in life transformation from the top down to the bottom. And I don't think some people realize the XP is the one that holds the hands of that lead pastor up to continue in ministry,
Yeah.
right? As Moses, as his fellow brothers did in the
Yeah.
battle. And so it is far more personal than what maybe some can realize from a distance, but it's significant. So, man, Nick, thank you so much for joining us here on an episode of the Build Groups podcast.
Man, what an honor. Excited for what God's doing through this ministry and what he continues to allow us to do. Being able to work with churches, they want to create better groups. They want to create disciples. And we have the strategy and the systems that help them move faster and actually accomplish that. So lean in on us. Let us help equip you to do what you do best.
Absolutely. Yes, Nick, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they wanted to talk with you or get to know more about how you can help them? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, my email is nick@myleadershipcoach.org. That's also my website, My Leadership. New website coming, but it's still a couple months away. But reaching out to build groups, reaching out to Adam, whatever that looks like, in order for us to connect and really have a heart just to see pastors be healthy and to lead ministry in a healthy way.
And there you have it. We don't seek to answer all your answers, but to spark, start, and spur on some good thought trails. And I know for a fact that all of you got that today. So you're welcome, number one. Number two, thank you for tuning in. Number three, if you want to dive in more and to just get in, and again, like just Nick said, just jump on a call, not even just, hey, we're going to do a whole whatever, strategy and systems, year-long consult. Just, hey, let's just jump on a call. Love to hear how you're doing, man, and help you guys. We do that often, and see if there's things that we can or can't help or point you in the right direction. That's what we're about. We're about helping the church move forward, using God's people to see God's mission fulfilled. That's our hope. So, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Build Groups podcast. You have a great rest of your day.